Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Non-Monogamy Help. I'm Lola Phoenix. Non-Monogamy Help is a relationships advice podcast for people in non-monogamous, polyamorous, and open relationships, and it comes out every other week, and the column comes out every other week besides that. Yes, one day that intro will be smooth. Apologies in advance as well for the noises, because I recorded in a flat and there were noises. Anyway, if you want your letter read on the podcast or addressed in the column, please send your letters to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com, and they'll be in either one, and you can specify if you'd like, and you're always anonymous, of course. Just so you, in case you don't know, seamless, you can read the column and get the podcast at medium.com/non-monogamy-help. You can subscribe to the email newsletter and get both of them in your inbox a few days before they're released to the general public by signing up at tinyletter.com/non-monogamy-help. And if you want to be amazing and super awesome, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. Even just $1 a month is super amazing. And if you pledge $5 or more a month, then your name gets read, if you would like to, with your consent, at the end of the podcast. Yeah. And you can follow us at twitter.com/non-monogamy-help. Exciting. So let's get to this week's letter. My partner and I have been together for almost 6 years. We married 3 years ago. My wife asked to change the parameters of our marriage 5 months ago so she could more seriously see someone. This guy was a person I'd already vocalized having issues and red flags for, but my wife said that her partner choice is not mine to make. It's been 5 months now, and I find myself not wanting to go out to community events for fear this dude will be there, blocking him on social media, and considering blocking her so I don't have to see their interactions online, and still deeply uncomfortable with her partner choice. He is unhealthy, she is often hungover after spending time with him, which infringes on our time together, and he still gives me and others in our immediate circle red flags. He is unhealthy and is drinking, drug use, depressed, doesn't exercise, and eats a poor diet. She's right, her partner choice isn't up to me, but I can't stand this guy, and I'm saddened that her relationship is making me want to retreat from my community. She has said that she enjoys dating people beneath her, but this guy is the bottom shelf at best. So there are a few things here. First and foremost, she is right. Her partner choice isn't really up to you, and I think that that's an important thing for you to remember, and it really does suck because there are situations like this where you really don't get along or like who your partner dates, and it's kind of a thing that you have to navigate. One thing that I really, really want to stress, and this is really important for you and other people who are in more dire situations, because I do think this situation is, because you don't go into specifically what type of red flags this person flags up, and I'm going to talk about the ways that you describe him being unhealthy. It's obviously not great that your partner is often hungover, but at the end of the day, it is her life. But I do think that if people are really worried about their partner dating someone who is showing some specific signs of abuse, such as their partner like trying to control who they interact with, things like that, even friends of people who are, basically in a relationship that seems abusive, it can be really, really hard to know what the right thing is to do, because I think most people's first instincts is to confront their friend and say, you need to stop dating this person is terrible, this person is bad. But actually, that approach can often backfire. So I would, even as much as you may have very good reasons for feeling like this guy is not good for your partner, any attempts you make to try to change that situation, either by saying dump him or I'll leave, or even light polite things, even to the extent of reminding her constantly, all of those to a person who is going through a situation where their partner is slowly kind of entrapping them and putting them in an abusive situation, because people aren't just all of a sudden abusive. Like, it slowly escalates. And for someone who's in that situation, if their friends or their family or other partners start to be even more controlling or controlling to them, they're going to retreat from that. So I think it's really important for you to remember throughout all of this that you trying to control the situation for her is never going to work. You can't force her to see this person the way you see them. Even if, and I understand that it's not just you who feels this. You say that, that he gives you and other people within your community red flags. You're never going to be able to force her to see it your way. And in fact, if this guy is specifically abusive, one of the first things that abusers try to do is isolate their victim. So they'll often, sometimes outright tell their victim that you can't be friends with this person, or I'm really jealous of this person, yada, yada, yada. Sometimes people help the abuser do that by deciding to further isolate that person. So it's really, really important to remember that if this person is red flag in terms of being really abusive, you don't want to put her in a situation where she's going to be further isolated and doesn't have anyone else to talk to. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't set your own boundaries. You're totally allowed to decide what is healthy and isn't healthy for you. You're totally allowed to feel the way you feel about, seeing their interactions online, and you're allowed to make your own boundaries. Like, you're allowed to say that she can do whatever she wants with this person, but for her to show up hungover on your time together is unacceptable. But the thing about these boundaries that you have to be willing to enforce them as well. So if you're going to say to her, regardless of how I feel about this situation and regardless of how I feel about this person, I don't want you to be hungover when we have our time together. It's not acceptable to me for that to happen. You can say that, but what's going to happen if and when she does show up hungover? What you need to think about in your mind, what are going to be the repercussions of that? And that can be really tricky because it's really hard to not feel like you're punishing someone, but at the same time, like, you need to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to have this time. And so you need to think about, the worst case scenario here. What if, you don't want to punish her, but you do need to decide, are you going to spend less time with her? Are you going to change the times you spend with her? I don't know if you live together. I assume maybe if you've been married for 3 years, you might live together. Maybe you might consider not living together anymore. It can be really, really difficult to face these kind of situations, but she's not really giving you any alternative. Like, she's allowed to date whomever she wants to date. That is very true, but it's not fair on you for her to, show up hungover and infringe your time together. When it comes to your community, like, I understand how you feel in terms of not wanting to go to community events. I think that's where you need to focus less on, your personal feelings and talk to the people who are also feeling red flags. Because the thing of it is the thing I'm worried about, and the thing that I often find that struggle people have with this kind of situation where there's somebody in the community that's throwing up red flags. Quite often, community organizers and people who are in charge don't know how to deal with that. It can be very, very difficult to know what the right solution is, especially when, if they were to say bar this guy from all community events, and that meant she never went to any more community events, and then let's say you decided because she showed up hungover again and again on your time together, you moved out. So now she's completely isolated with this guy, and she can't go to any more community events because he's not there. It becomes really difficult. I think sometimes communities feel like they have to choose between letting everything happen and just letting everything go and not getting involved, or completely banning someone. And I really feel like there is a third option that involves potentially holding accountability, thinking about all of these people who feel like this person is throwing up red flags. Can you not get together as a community and think about how to confront him, how to tell him what about his behavior is throwing red flags for you, and bring him into the conversation rather than kicking him out. And that's something that you need the help of a community to do. But I do think that if you're feeling uncomfortable at community events, that's not necessarily her fault. And I don't want you to feel like you're pitted in between him and her, and I don't want her to feel pitted in the middle. But I do think that if you seek the advice and the opinions of other people in the community, and less, banding together to kick him out, because you're just kicking him out to go to another community where he might still be crossing people's boundaries, or, showing up their red flags, to actually create a situation where there's a solution to this. You might think about holding him to account as a community, if you feel like that's something that your community can do. It's a very difficult and tricky thing to do, and I think not all organizers and events people are going to be prepared for that kind of a thing. There's quite a lot of people, especially if they're running an event on their own time and they're volunteering, just frankly don't have the spoons for it or don't have the patience for it. And you might consider, all of those people that you're together with who are feeling uncomfortable, maybe you guys have your own time, organize your own things with them. Nobody owns community events. Nobody owns community. You can get together with whomever and, whenever you want. I mean, it's hard for me to say. I don't know if you're like in a really, really small town and there are like only one of two bars, or maybe one bar to go to or something like that. But you can make an attempt to create your own community spaces with those people who also feel like you do. And it's an unfortunate thing to have to kind of like splinter in a way, but I do think that if that's something that's going to make you feel more comfortable, then do it. If you really feel like as well, like blocking her so you don't see those interactions, it's perfectly fine for you to say, right, you can date who you want. I really, really don't like this person. I've blocked them already. I do a little bit more research to see, because I've been in situations like that where my partner is just friends, like not even dating, but just friends with someone that I just really don't like because they're really terrible to me and I didn't want to see them, so I blocked them, and I haven't been able to see their interactions online. Sorry for the background noise. So there may be other filters that you can use and things, but you are allowed, if you want to say to your partner, like, look, I don't like this person, I support you, I care about you, but I don't like this person, and maybe we won't be friends on this social media. You're friends in real life. You don't have to be friends on Facebook as well. If that's what you need to do to make yourself feel better, then do it. It shouldn't be, she might get hackled about it, but explain it. Your concern here should be less necessarily with how irritated you are by it, and more about, you have genuine concern for her. And that's another thing that I think that's worth you looking at as well, is what you think is healthy. Because there's a lot of things that you cite, like drinking, drug use, depression, exercise, poor diet. There are a lot of different things all meddled up within that one thing. People can drink responsibly. People can use drugs responsibly. People do have depression, and that doesn't make them undateable. A lot of people struggle with depression. It's not their fault. Not exercising, for some people, exercise can be dangerous for them. It's not really up to you to define whether or not someone does or doesn't exercise and whether or not that's healthy for them. That's a discussion that they need to have with their healthcare provider if that's something that they need to address. And poor diet, again, like, you're not a nutritionist, and it's not you who gets to decide what is a bad diet and isn't a bad diet for someone. You may have an opinion about what is healthy and not healthy to eat, and you're welcome to that opinion, but you don't really get to decide for other people, what they should or shouldn't eat. And equally, you don't get to decide that for your partner either. If you are eating together and you're sharing a meal together and you don't want to have things which you would consider poor eating or, not good eating, whatever you want to consider that as, that's one thing. But when they're eating their own food on their own, that's their responsibility in their life. And I think that you should really do a little bit of self-exploration about what healthy means, because what concerns me is that, red flag is a very broad term. And if you said that this person was attempting to control who she was friends with, if you said that this person was, that she was dating, was spreading lies about you or trying to basically manipulate her against you, those are red flags to me. I think that, drug use and drinking may not be something you approve of or like, which I can understand. I'm not necessarily a huge drinker myself, and quite often end up very frustrated when only, social gatherings focus around drink. But at the end of the day, it's their life and their decisions And those aren't red flags in and of themselves. Somebody drinking, someone using drugs, someone being depressed, not exercising, and eating what you would consider a poor diet are not red flags and are not necessarily quote-unquote unhealthy things. They're unhealthy for you, and that's valid, but that's not really what you get to decide. So I think that you need to rethink your framework here. And I do kind of wonder, because what really, confuses me about this situation that you're in is that, you're really heavily judging this person for not being healthy, and yet at the same time you say that your partner has said that she enjoys dating people beneath her. And what does that say about you, though? And I'm really surprised that you don't, it doesn't seem like this has been something that you've reflected on. She enjoys dating people beneath her. I mean, that's a very strange thing for anyone to say. And I don't know, is that I would, it depends on how she said it. If she specifically said, I enjoy dating people beneath me, I don't know. I think that would, regardless of who that person dated, would kind of be a little bit strange for me to hear, because basically what they're telling me is that they think that I am beneath them. So, I'm worried about this situation in terms of, you're so busy looking at this other guy and thinking he's the bottom of the shelf. You're kind of on the shelf with him, if that's the case. You may think you're better than him in terms of how healthy you are, or you may think you're not as bad as him, but if she enjoys dating people beneath her, then you are beneath her too. And is that something that you really want to be? Putting aside, because I totally think it's understandable for you to be upset if someone shows up to a date that you've planned or time that you've planned together hungover and doesn't have the energy for you. I totally get that, and that is totally fine to object to. But you have to one of the things about polyamory and one of the unfortunate experiences people can have when they kind of open up their relationship or see their partner dating other people is that they can realize their partner's tastes and who else their partner dates and what their partner does when they date. And maybe this is part of the irritation of this, especially if your partner has said that she enjoys dating people beneath her. Are you really irritated by this guy completely? Or are you more irritated that she's dating him and you, and what does that say about you? So I think that's something that's really worth exploring, because putting aside all this, it's not up to you who she dates. Yeah, you're allowed to put down your boundaries. Yeah, you're totally understandable with objecting to someone showing up hungover, and you do need to re-examine what you think health means and why that applies to other people and why it's necessarily your business. But at the same time, I also think that this is a red flag that you're kind of ignoring, that she enjoys dating people beneath her. And again, like you said, she has said this. It's not just your own personal commentary. And that's the thing that I think you really should think about. Sometimes when we see our partner dating other people and we see how they behave in other relationships, and we see, who they pick, sometimes that changes how we feel about our partners. Because, when you first meet someone, if they're not currently in a relationship with anyone else, or, you're both kind of in a single position and then you start dating, you can kind of have those rose-tinted glasses and you kind of think that they chose you because you're the best, or you're healthy, or whatever that means. But actually maybe the reasons that you think they chose you are not the reasons that they chose you. And it's hard for me to say what her reasons are for choosing you, but I do think that this is worth you really thinking about. So yeah, to kind of sum up the thoughts here, I think that she is right that it's not up to you who she dates. It isn't, unfortunately, as uncomfortable as you are. And also, I really want to impress upon you that even if you could make a rule and say break up with this person, that isn't going to solve the underlying issue. That isn't going to fix everything. Controlling the situation won't fix it. But yeah, it's not really up to you who she dates. However, you are allowed to have your own boundaries, and that does mean if you want to remove her as a friend and not see their interactions, you can. If you want to set the boundary that, you're not going to tolerate her being hungover when it's your time to spend together, and she needs to manage her time adequately so that she can make sure she's not hungover and has the the energy for you that you want, that's a fine thing to say. But you know, with all these boundaries that you are allowed to have, you need to really think about what you're going to do if they're crossed. What are the repercussions of that? And really think about how you're going to enforce them, because it's not really, you know, good enough for you to say, right, no more coming to our dates hungover. If she does and nothing happens, then it doesn't really matter, does it? You need to think about what you're going to do if this continues and where that leaves you. I think that you should really examine what health means, because I understand like some of your objections to this person, but the others may just be personality differences in how you like to live your life, and that's fine. Like you know, if you're super into, you know, going to the gym and that person isn't, that's fine. You're allowed to have that, but it's not really up to you to decide what is unhealthy. And whether or not he's unhealthy is kind of irrelevant to you. What he is kind of irrelevant. And it's more that you need to think about what those red flags are, and if they are red flags, or if it's kind of like you know, just not liking him very much. You can be kind of a mess, you know, you can be kind of a person that you might consider a messy person, but not be abusive, you know. People can have depression, and that's not something they can control. They can not exercise if they don't want to, and they can eat whatever they want, and that's not necessarily a red flag in and of itself. So think about what that means. And lastly, like, I think this last comment about she enjoys dating people beneath her, I think you should really think about that. And I think it's worth you finding a polyamory friendly therapist. Like, you can find a couples therapist to kind of talk these things out, and maybe that's a consequence. Maybe if you make it really clear, you know, you don't have to hear anything about this person. You don't even have to know anything about them. Like, people kind of do all this like compersion and, oh, wouldn't it be great? It'd be great if we all got along with our Metamours, if we all loved our Metamours and they were great people and yada yada. That would be great, but that doesn't always happen. It's not realistic to expect that. And it is okay if you want absolutely no information about this person because they annoy the piss out of you. Like, you know, regardless of what health or unhealthy or whatever, you know, it could just be that you know, you don't like the person. Like, she could dump this guy and time can pass, and then she could date somebody else who just, like, maybe, you know, does all the things you would consider healthy, but it's just super annoying, and you just don't get along with him. And that's fine still. Like, you're allowed to say, right, you date that person, that's fine for you, but this is my area, these are my boundaries, this is my space, and I don't want to have to deal with any of his stuff in my space. When it comes to your individual personal space within your house and your social space where you have people as friends or not friends on Facebook, you can decide that. When it comes to your wider community, like I said, you need to circle around, gather with those people who also feel the same way. See if there's an accountability process to be had, if there's something for that person to be accountable for. If there is a genuine red flag, then maybe that's something you pursue, or just kind of hang out with the other people. I mean, it does suck, like, that, you know, if you feel like he's going to the same community events and you don't like him, but this kind of thing happens in general. Like, you just end up, like, I'm in that situation now. There are a lot of people who have either been shitty to me or who I just don't like, who are at a lot of polyamory themed events where I am, and I don't go to them because I'm like, ugh, that person's going, I don't want to go. Unfortunately, the polyamory communities, even in big cities, tend to be quite small worlds, and this kind of thing unfortunately happens. I don't think there's necessarily a huge amount of things you can do. If there's a serious cause for concern in terms of like abusive red flags, and this person needs to be brought up on those kinds of things, I would look up kind of accountability processes. There's one right now going on. If you look up the polyamory Me Too movement, there's a big accountability process going on with quite a well-known writer of different polyamory resources, and that might be a model you might consider if that person is to that level of a red flag situation. If they're just kind of a jerk and they aren't what you would consider healthy, that's not a red flag situation. That's just a difference in personality and how they like to hold themselves versus what you think they should do. And then lastly, like, I really, really think you should think about, you know, the worst case scenario, unfortunately. Like, if this situation progresses, you know, where are you? Like, you can't fix everything. Like, if this person is a red flag in terms of, like, abusive, you can't really fix everything. You can't rescue her from that situation. There's a really great book called Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft, which I think every human being in the world should read, because it's kind of like about abusive mindsets and how they impact people and how to help people in those situations who are kind of caught up in or in abusive relationships. But the long and the short of it is that there isn't any magic solution that you can do to pull someone out of that situation. If they want to date someone who is, causing them to be hungover, there really isn't anything you can do about that yourself. But you can control your own environments and your own actions, and it's worth you thinking about, unfortunately, what's, the worst thing that could happen. Nothing changes. Where does that leave you? And I think that's definitely worth you having a think about. So yeah, there's a lot of different things I addressed. I feel like I want to sum up things again, but I think I've summed up everything as much as I can. I really hope this helps, and good luck. Thank you so much for listening to Non-Monogamy Help. I'm Lola Phoenix. As I said, I also wanted to, at the end of this podcast, say thank you, as of this recording, to the patrons who have pledged $5 or more a month, and those patrons are Laura Boylan, Chris Albery Jones, Frenzy, and James Wartell. Thank you so much. If you want to be an amazing, awesome person, you can donate £5, no, it's not £5, it's $5 US, but if you are not American, don't worry, just put your details in and it sorts it out somehow. I don't know how they do it. It's wizardry. And if you donate $5 a month, then your name will be read out loud, and it's just an enormous help. It goes towards helping host the podcast. It's sort of it makes me feel like people support what I do, and I hopefully one day, it'd be great if this was my main job. I would absolutely love it. It would be super amazing. So yeah, help me take down Savage's job, basically, and be a patron. You can go to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix if you want to do that. Also want to give a shout out again. I give a shout out at the end of the podcast for Chris Albery Jones, who did the theme music, Dom Duong, who did the art for the podcast. Definitely go and look at Dom's profile and all of the art. If you need an illustrator, hire Dom. And if you want some music for something, get in touch with Chris. And they're both amazing people, and I really, really appreciate them and all the help that they give. Also, Dave Pickering has helped me with editing tips, and Dave Pickering, I can't speak today, is also super awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to plug those people too. Anyway, so that's all for this week. You will hear me. Look, I'm gonna finally get this down. I'm gonna stop saying you will see me because it's a bit weird. I'm gonna finally get it right. You will hear from me next week. Awesome. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our podcast music has been provided by Chris Albery Jones at albery-jones.com, and the art was made by Dom Jung at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.